Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our Coffee Times to talk about horror. And today I'm finally here, finally sitting down to talk to you about 28 Years Later. I saw this movie basically when it came out, but I wanted to take my time to make this video and I have been busy, so I hope that you guys are still interested. I don't know if all of you have already seen the film, but because this review is coming a little bit later, I thought I would give you a little bit of a commentary on the franchise in general and how we got to 28 years later, and also what is the potential future of this franchise.
It's coffee time!
Now, before I went to see 28 Years Later, I did rewatch the other two movies because it had been a hot minute since I watched them, and I remember when I first watched 28 Days Later, I really loved that movie for what it did, bring something fresh and new to the table. And for me personally, it still stands out as one of the best virus movies out there for me, in my opinion. So let's talk about the 28 Years Later movie, but also a little bit about the franchise until we get to 28 years after that outbreak. The 28 Days Later franchise is basically a collection of post-apocalyptic movies, and they're all created by Alex Garland. And if you've seen any of his other movies, you know that he's a very particular and imaginative guy. The series so far includes 3 released movies, and there is talk of 2 following up sequels. The franchise depicts the outbreak of something called the Rage virus, and it is a contagious virus that creates kind of like homicidal tendencies in the people that are infected, and they are just there to kill. Following the virus's accidental release, it kind of creates a collapse in the world of civilization, obviously, and it starts to spread out very quickly. The virus was released accidentally kind of in the United Kingdom, so that is the country that is the most affected and also where the movies take place. The films focus on the impact of the outbreak that it has in humans, society, and the world, and we see how things change and how everything collapses basically. We all know that George R. Romero's Night of the Living Dead did change a lot of things for the zombie genre when it came out, and it's one of those zombie movies that deserves all the praise. And when 28 Days Later came out in 2002, it kind of did the same thing. It suddenly gave us people that were infected, but they were running very quickly. And a lot of people are going to argue that that is because they're not zombies. I mean, there are similarities, obviously, to this infected and zombies, but to be fair, we shouldn't consider the infected in 28 Days Later zombies because they are not undead, they didn't come back from the dead, and they don't want your brains, you know? It's not exactly zombies, so I always like to call them the infected. And that of course made the infected in these movies a lot more menacing, a lot more dangerous, and a lot more scary. All the movies so far have been directed by Danny Boyle, and they have been written by Alex Garland, and this duo is what has kept this franchise alive. It did have a break for a second, and I'll talk about that later. But first, let's talk about that very first movie that came out 28 Days Later, that came out in 2002. The first movie explains how the virus got out, and that is because a group of animal activists decided to enter this top secret facility where scientists were investigating the Rage virus in some chimpanzees, and they decided to release the animals. They thought they were doing something good, but obviously they released the Rage virus into the world. 28 days afterward, a bicycle courier named Jim awakens in a hospital after a near-death accident that placed him into a coma and under medical care. He discovers that Great Britain is completely desolated with savage, infected, and crazed survivors. When I rewatched this movie, you know, the first thought that I had when Jim woke up at the hospital was like, The Walking Dead. Same kind of scenario, you know, like you see the similarities there. And imagine waking up from a year-long coma just to find out that the world basically no longer exists, at least in the United Kingdom, because there are not many humans left. And everything is basically infected everywhere. You also don't know that there's infected, so how are you supposed to survive? The movie, even though of course it is a horror movie and it's about the infected, it's more about how society reacts to this kind of thing, how the remaining humans organize and how they communicate and deal with each other. And it's a lot more about human connections, a lot more about family, found family in the first movie. And I really appreciated all of that. And I think, you know, Cillian Murphy's character in this movie was my favorite thing. To see his character arc from the beginning where he's just shy, he doesn't know what's going on, to the beast that we see at the end, it's just fantastic. Then we got 28 Weeks Later in 2007. So here we follow a group of survivors. We follow a couple of people that are hiding in a cottage in London. And two of the people that are living there are the married couple, Donald and Alice. One day an orphaned boy knocks at their door, desperately asking to get in. They do let the boy in, but unfortunately they also let in some infected, and it becomes like a massacre in the house, and Donald manages to escape. In 28 Weeks Later, the infected are starting to die off, and they have managed to establish some safe zones for refugees, and that includes Tammy and Andy, who are Don and Alice's children. When the children return home, they find their mother alive but infected with the rage virus. Unfortunately, because people are not following protocol, people are being stupid as they always do in this type of movies, the virus is loose in the world again. So basically everything they had done to protect the refugees and make sure that they kept the infected outside and dying off naturally, I think they die in, I don't know if it was 5 weeks or 5 months if they don't feed. So that's what they were waiting for. They were waiting for them to just die off so that they could clean up and, you know, rebuild society. But we got a new outbreak, so we are fudged again. I mean, otherwise the movie will not be as fun, right? In this one again, of course, we have a horror movie, the horrors of having a virus spread, the infected, and also we follow a family here. We have the dad, we have the children, we have a mother. So we are focusing again on humanity, how that has affected families, how that affects relationships, and how sometimes you don't make the best decisions in life because you're trying to protect a loved one, maybe even if they are infected. Something that I really like about this infected is that when you get bitten or you get blood, because you get basically infected by coming in contact with blood, is that you turn in a matter of seconds. So the other person in front of you has seconds to decide if they want to kill you or not. And it is quite terrifying if you think about it. So now that we have talked a little bit about this movie series and what the first movies were about, how the virus spread, how it came out, and what happened so far, let's talk about 28 Years Later. Again, this movie is directed by Danny Boyle and it is written by Alex Garland. And one of the co-producers is Cillian Murphy that played Jim in the first one, so it's coming full circle. Obviously, 28 Years Later, it is a follow-up, a direct follow-up to 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. And it stars Jodie Comer, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Alfie Williams in his debut, and Ralph Fiennes. And I have to say, all of these actors did an outstanding job, but especially Alfie, this being his first feature film debut, he was the star of the show. So they had plans to continue this franchise right after 28 Weeks Later. However, there were problems with the rights of the movie. I think it changed hands from one studio to the other one, and they were having trouble to get an agreement to keep going with the series. But finally, one of the producers called Andrew managed to get the rights back. He bought the rights back to this franchise, to this movie series, and they were able to finally get into more of a development of the movie that we now have 28 years later. I can imagine Danny Boyle and Alex Garland just waiting to keep going because I can see how passionate they are about this movie series. And they've already shot the sequel to this movie. Basically, they shot this one's back to back. The second one is going to be called 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, and it's allegedly coming out in January 2026, so we don't even have to wait that long. It's been almost 3 decades since the rage virus escaped from a biological weapons laboratory. Still living in a ruthless and forced quarantine, some have found ways to exist amid the infected. One group of survivors lives on a small island connected to the mainland by a single heavily defended causeway. But then some of the people decide to venture a little bit further into the mainland and then make some gruesome discoveries about the infected and about some survivors that are still out there. 28 years later basically follows a young guy called Spike. He's only 12 and this is the only life he knows. He's never lived in the society that we know. He was born during this whole thing, so he doesn't understand any other life apart from the one that he has. He has been quarantined his whole life and all he knows is the neighbors, his dad and his mom that live with him, so he's very lucky that he has his parents. He has his mother Isla that is suffering from a illness. I don't know exactly what she has because they don't have any doctors left in this, in this little community that they have built. And he also lives with his father Jamie, who is very proud of his son Spike, and he is really excited because Spike is almost ready to start going to trips to the mainland to try to look for goods. Obviously they're still trying to get food and things from whatever they can find and bring them back to the commune. But also when you go out there, you need to be ready to shoot and kill the infected. And that is exactly what he does. Jamie knows that Spike's a little bit too young to start his first journey to the mainland, but he thinks that he's ready. So with a bow and arrow and with a lot of courage, both father and son decide to go one day to investigate the mainland and have like the first trip for Spike. It's kind of like a coming of age, like kind of turning into a man, for boy to man. That's what it means to the community. So Spike is really excited to finally become a man, and he might not have been ready for that trip, let me tell you, because the things that his kid sees right off the bat are horrifying. The film was shot using different technologies, but the majority of the film was actually shot through iPhones, which is crazy to think. There is a behind the scenes picture where you can see a bunch of iPhones that are connected in kind of like a wire that looks like a horseshoe, and it's really interesting to see how they got those images using just phones. It is edited and cut in a very interesting way, in a way that it's almost like jarring. You have these really like close-up shots, you have shots where it's just kills and the blood basically splashes to the screen, and utilizing all of those various cameras techniques I think really brought the film back to what it was. I think it has kept the spirit, but I will tell you that this movie feels very different from the other two. I don't know if it's something that both Boyle and Garland had in mind already back in the day, or if it's something that they have had more time to create because they've had a longer period of time to plan this third movie. There's a lot of narrow shots that makes the movie so much more claustrophobic and really ups the tension in a lot of the scenes. But there's also kind of like some shots that I think we're taking with drones that really allow you to see how big the whole area is, and all the woods and everything has been now covered by nature, obviously because it's been many years, and basically it's just woods all around, and it is beautiful to see the landscape. The cinematography was fantastic. There are some cryptic images of deers at night that were beautifully shot, and you also have the same song that you hear in the trailer that was very unsettling. You get the same thing here, but you get also some images from the past to help you understand the context, and I thought that was so jarring, that was just so powerful. I really enjoyed it. If there's something I'm gonna praise them for, is that they were able to manage the different tonal shifts throughout the film. I think this movie has at least 3 different shifts in tone, and that can be something that is gonna turn off a lot of people, let me tell you that, because the movie starts as one thing, then it turns into something else, and then it turns again into something else. And I'm not gonna spoil the movie for you, but I enjoyed the whole journey and I enjoyed it to the very end. But I can understand why for some people this movie might be not what they were expecting. The movie is basically Spike's life and how it is for him, somebody that was born in a quarantine space. And you get to see him fighting the infected, and we have to talk about the infected and the fun part of that and the fun part of killing them. But then you have kind of like a coming of age story where it gets a little bit more serious, and we get to know how this little boy is really turning into a man, and it doesn't have anything to do with just killing infected. It even turns emotional at some point, so just saying it in case you guys, you know, we're expecting something that is just kill, 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 action, action, action the whole time. So in a way, 28 years later is not just a horror movie. I think it's a beautiful coming of age story and a very detailed one. I do love coming of age stories. I think they're very powerful, and I really enjoyed the story. I know some people complained about the story, that it was messy, that it was all over the place, but I didn't think so personally. So this might be a movie that might be a hit or a miss for a lot of people. When it comes to the horror, yes, there is horror, okay? There are a lot of moments that are very tense, moments where you're scared for the main characters, moments where you are scared about this infected, and there's a lot of gore, there's blood, there's kills, like you're gonna get that, but maybe not as a larger scale, because like I said, this movie has different tones and moments where it quiets down a little bit. One of my favorite things about this movie is that I got to see kinds of infected that we had not seen in the previous movies, because obviously we are nearly 3 decades away from that start, and mutations of course happen. And also the movie is gonna get a lot weirder when it comes to the infected as the movie goes along. This type of serious zombie slash infected movies are not just there for the horror. I think it's kind of like a mirror to see society and see how we would deal in this kind of situation, and it shows the horrors of humans. It kind of shows the ugly truths about humankind and who we are as a society, as a civilization. This is a very ambitious project. I think it's their most ambitious so far, because they have always been kind of taking it a step further, I think, in this series and bringing something fresh to the table. This movie feels very, very different from the other two. I think the other two were closer together when it comes to the theme and the characters, and this one is very different. However, I think that's what I also loved it so much, because they decided to take a risk, and for me it paid off. So I know this might surprise a lot of people, but I did end up giving this movie a 4 out of 5, because for me it did check a lot of my boxes, and for me it really worked, even though, like I said, there's a lot of emotions and love and family drama even, not just horror. This movie really showed how resilient people can be when they are facing something as horrible as this virus, but not just that, also life itself that has very ugly and dark sides. You also get to see people that despite everything they've been through, they're still bitter, and there are still people that you cannot fully trust. I've always said this, and I will die on this, that if there is an outbreak like this, doesn't matter, zombies, aliens, virus, whatever it is, your worst enemy, it's probably still gonna be all the humans. And they delivered all of this commentary and this wonderful, like, coming of age story for Spike while giving us horror and infected, different types of infected. I have not given you more explanation on that because I think it's more fun if you discover what kind of infected you're gonna get, but they're very, very different from the ones you get to know in the other two movies, and it makes perfect sense. It's been 28 years. The virus changes, mutates, and it creates different type of creatures. For me, it did live up to the hype. For me, it was worth the wait, and I'm really excited to see what they're gonna do with the next movie that they've already filmed, and it's coming out in a couple of months, which is very exciting. And there is rumors that there might be a third movie as well to conclude the trilogy, and I've even heard rumors that one of these movies, I think the third and final one, might be kind of bringing closure to the character of Cillian Murphy, which would be amazing. We only have so far confirmation for the second movie. It was originally talked about a trilogy, so I don't know if they're gonna do the third one or not, but at least we know for sure that we're gonna get the second movie next year. Let me know down below what you thought about this film. I think it's going to divide people a lot because it is very different from the first two, and I did love the first two and I still love this one. So I know, I'm curious to see what you guys thought about this one. Do you like the franchise? What did you thought about the new movie? Let me know in the comments down below. I hope that you enjoyed this spoiler-free review, and I hope to see you all, as always, in our next coffee time. Bye.